How's it going, guys? I'm KTO, and I wanted to bring you guys a guide to the 2017 NFL Draft. Really quickly, I know a lot of you have asked about this, so I'm going to put my new Twitter handle on this video and in the description. This will be especially for draft updates and then live thoughts throughout the draft, and then you guys can let me know what you guys think during the draft and what your team does, and then just moving forward with channel updates and then football news in general, and then just speaking my mind. So like I said, check me out in the description down below, and let's go ahead and get started with this video. This will be the 82nd annual draft, which will start at 8 p.m. Eastern time on April 27th in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The players selected will be announced from an outdoor theater built on the famous Rocky Steps. And this will mark the first time an entire NFL draft will be held outdoors. Also, an interesting fact, Philadelphia was where the inaugural draft was held in 1936. Now, just a quick note, this guide isn't made to provide a scouting report on every player in the draft. It's more of to help you better understand what your team may be thinking going into the draft. There's actually 3 teams who were forced to forfeit picks. The Patriots lost a 4th round pick to the Deflategate penalty, the Seahawks lost a 5th round pick for violating the on-field physical contact rule, and the Chiefs lost a 6th round pick for violating the league's anti-tampering policy. And also, the 4th round pick for the Giants was moved back to the end of the round because of illegal use of walkie-talkies on their sideline during Week 14 last season. But now, let's get into the actual talent of this draft. So, let's break down the top players in this draft based on their position groups. And the possible first rounders I list were players ranked in the top 50. So the positions that round out the top of our list are corner, edge, and running back, whereas at the bottom of this draft, it's relatively weak with offensive linemen. And then on top of that, the quarterback class has a lot of question marks. Also, here's a concept about how the talent is usually picked in the draft. So for players who are categorized in the top 4 or 5 positions on this list, probably will go later than they're actually worth. For example, there's nearly 8 corners who graded out as a first round talent. That's why you don't see mock drafts usually having any more than 3 or 4 corners going. It's just simple supply and demand. Teams will most likely primarily focus on getting the top guy at the position, especially if that position's top heavy like edge or safety, and then later on teams will probably wait on the guys who are the mid guys, you know, the Taco Charltons, the Derek Barnetts. As far as talent goes, those guys are probably top 15 picks, but as far as how the talent grades out in this draft, they could possibly drop all the way to the end of the first round. And when it comes to running backs, this class is so loaded, you will see running backs go day 2 and 3 that will probably start this year and make a big impact. The same supply and demand concept works the other way as well. Quarterbacks, for example. Like I said, this class has a lot of unknowns, but because there's a major need at the position, they will go earlier than they're graded out. Guys like Deshaun Kaiser and Pat Mahomes don't grade out as a first round talent, but because like I said, teams' futures are so dependent on a franchise quarterback, so someone's most likely to pull the trigger. Here's a list of every team and probably what they're thinking going into the first round. I'm not going to go over each of these teams one by one. It's more of for you to look at what your team wants. I will say, however, I have listed some of these teams in a certain color based on desperation for a quarterback. Red is the most desperate, and yellow is maybe desperate soon. And then just an interesting twist on this class from a college perspective, surprise, surprise, Alabama leads the way with 6 potential first rounders. The 4 college football playoff teams actually did pretty good. Ohio State had 4, Clemson has 2, and Washington has 3. Clemson's Deshaun Watson and Mike Williams is kind of like Mike Evans and Johnny Manziel, a quarterback receiver duo who probably both go in the first round. Now, I'm not saying Watson's like Manziel, it's just an interesting tidbit. Here's the best of the rest for college teams. LSU has 3 potential picks, Stanford has 2 potential, and Michigan as well. After that, there's no other teams that have more than 1 potential first round pick. As far as the very top of this draft and quarterbacks, this class is actually pretty comparable to 2014. There's a surefire number 1 pick in Myles Garrett. In 2014, it was Clowney, both dominant in SEC and both earned Freshman of the Year honors. And then for the quarterbacks, there's major question marks. For the 4 main guys, you really didn't know where they're going to go or where they should have gone. And then the whole quarterback wide receiver going first round thing is pretty cool, just like how it did in 2014. But let's talk about this quarterback class just a little bit. This year's Carson Wentz has to be Mitch Trubisky. And I'm not even going to say Mitch is going to be good. I just mean that months ago, no one was talking about him being a first round pick. And now, even though he's had limited playing time, Trubisky is being considered by a lot of analysts as the top guy, and he could possibly go even number 1 or 2. Now, that's probably very unlikely, but I could still see him going at a spot like number 6. NFL draft scout Dane Brugler actually did a pretty interesting test. He took the last 3 draft classes and ranked them out based on their pre-draft rankings. Now looking at this list, I know you see Jared Goff ahead of guys like Carson Wentz, which he probably shouldn't be after his rookie season. Like I said, pre-draft rankings. Anyway, we see number 1 and 2 makes sense. They were really hyped up, they were definitely going 1 and 2, and they both have been great so far in their young careers. Then you surprisingly see Mitch Trubisky above Carson Wentz, which I don't know if that's probably deserved, but it is what it is. And then Kaiser above Watson. I think Watson definitely goes before Kaiser. And then at 8 and 9, Lynch and Mahomes are probably 2 of the more physically talented quarterbacks on this list. But they're both extremely raw and need a ton of time to develop. You saw it last year with Lynch, it's going to be something similar with Mahomes. Now moving on to running backs. I'm not going to go over every single position like I am right now, but I really wanted to highlight running backs because this could possibly be the best class in the history of the NFL. Another NFL draft evaluator did the same kind of observation. He ranked out each class since 2014, and here's how it turned out. Remember, this is their pre-draft rankings. And at the top, no surprise, Zeke Elliott ranks out as the top guy. He led the league in rushing yards last season and looks like to be a force for years to come. Then you see Fournette and Cook above Gurley, who was the rookie of the year his first season. And then guys like Gordon, Henry, and Hyde are all solid backs. And then just looking at the bottom of this list, there's still great talent. Jeremy Hill is a touchdown machine, averaging nearly 10 a season. And Jordan Howard was probably the biggest surprise among rookies on this list. He was second only to Zeke in rushing yards last season, and he didn't even start or really play in the first 3 games. Even Tevin Coleman's been great. He was part of the deadliest 1-2 punch in the league for running backs. Him and Devontae Freeman helped the Falcons to the #1 rush offense last season. But overall, looking at this list, you see how many of these 2017 guys rank higher than some of these really good backs. A player I really want to highlight is Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon is this year's Tyreek Hill, not as far as play style or position. I'm just talking about their situation. If you've seen my video about rookies who came out of nowhere, you would know Hill was a 5th round pick. He ended up being a Pro Bowler and first team All-Pro as an essential part of the Chiefs. Both are extremely talented dudes, but they both had domestic issues. And just like how Hill fell in the draft, it's going to do the same thing to Mixon. Mixon won't fall nearly as far as Tyreek did because his talent level is just too great. There is reports though that a lot of teams have crossed Mixon completely off their list. They're just not going to be messing with him at all, which makes sense, I understand that. But he's being compared to Le'Veon Bell. Mixon will be a solid 3-down back for anyone who pulls the trigger on him. Honestly, I feel like if he gets in the right situation or scheme, he could possibly be the rookie of the year next season. Now, because I like analytics, I wanted to show you guys each team's draft capital. Now, Chase Stewart of Football Perspective made a draft chart based on this point system that he made. Here's how it works. Round 1 pick 1 is worth 34.6 points, while the very last pick in the draft is worth only 0.1. Just to highlight the teams with the most value and the least value, you see the teams with the most value, the Browns, Niners, Bears, Titans, and Saints, which makes sense. A lot of these teams are really bad. They have a lot of higher picks. And if you remember last year, the Browns and Titans had the top 2 picks, which they both traded for draft capital this season. Also, the Browns lead the way with the most draft picks with 11. And then looking at the teams with the least amount of draft capital, you're going to see some better teams on this list. Patriots, Falcons, Cowboys, Vikings. Then you also see the Rams. This is pretty rough for the Rams. They traded everything for Goff, and so you're not going to see them have much draft capital. So they're kind of in a rough spot. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter how much draft capital you have. It matters what you do with the picks. So at the end of the day, it's got to be quality over quantity, and best of luck to your teams.